Hi guys, it's Ness. In this episode of Ready Made Movie Reviews, we'll be reviewing the hidden gem slasher film, The Haunt. I definitely didn't expect this movie to be good, but I was really pleasantly surprised, so enjoy. We start off on the street. Clearly, it's a lovely and spooky Halloween. We meet our main protagonist, Harper. She looks to be putting on black eye makeup until it becomes apparent she's actually covering up a black eye. And it becomes even more apparent that she has an extremely abusive boyfriend named Sam. Her catgirl roommate we meet named Bailey insists she come out with him and her friends that night. Even though Harper opposes, since she would rather spend Halloween inside, she goes anyway. We're introduced to more characters as we see them in the club, partying up on Halloween. Woo! Harper gets a cryptic text from her abusive boyfriend about him wearing a costume. She kind of becomes worried about this, and she thinks he's at the party and probably coming for her. She decides she needs to go outside and get some air. She makes the hasty decision to go to her mother's house, and she looks up and sees what she believes to be her boyfriend Sam, just standing there, being really creepy. She gets distracted by our sexy male protagonist. She looks up and the creep has suddenly disappeared. Someone in their group tells them that they have an invite to this epic haunted house. I have no idea where he obtained this invite, but his activities and this shady invite will probably cause most of their deaths. That much is clear. They drive for what appears to be like hours, and they're in the middle of freaking nowhere. I don't care if this is the most well-lit base I've ever seen. This extremely creepy haunted house in the middle of nowhere. Why? People always act like they've never seen a horror movie in their freaking life before. When they see the haunted house again, I would definitely have put that sexy mom van in reverse and never came back to that location. But oh well, here we are at this shady establishment. They approach the haunted house, and the creepy masked clown says absolutely nothing. He just hands them waivers that probably state if they brutally murder them, they cannot be held responsible. It also asks them for a disturbing amount of personal information, such as their addresses, their parents' addresses. All right, guys, under no circumstances should a haunted house need that kind of information, and under no circumstances, kids, should you ever give that information to any establishment unless absolutely necessary. All right, the mom in me has said her part. I don't even think that part was really dramatic. I think that people are just far too trusting of their personal information to give away to random strangers. They leave all of their cell phones in the front locked up, and they head inside to their impending doom. The haunted house looks quite standard at first. They see some cheap webs and spooks. Then they walk into a display room of some kind, where a person who's dressed as a witch has taken center stage. She opens up a body bag to reveal a real girl, and then proceeds to burn her face with a hot poker in front of everyone. The people are staring at it alarmingly, but they obviously don't really think anything of it. They kind of just let the girl get burned and move on. It's really not their fault. They probably thought it was part of the show, you know? It's honestly the girl in the body bag's fault. Never does she say during this is real. This is not an act. She could have told them what was going to happen next. She could have told them that her friends were being killed and to turn around. Instead, she probably just screamed, help me, why are you doing this? That's what any actor would say. You know, I don't know. It's her fault, though. I'm blaming her. So, coming up, they're offered two options, a safe and an unsafe maze option. This is the first of many actions in this movie that I actually think they had a very clever perspective on how they split up characters, you know, without making it seem like a really cheesy Scooby-Doo like team, let's split up decision. You know, it was a very clever thought out process of how they split characters up in this movie. I liked it. We follow our unsafe gang first, where they start walking through many webs only to find out that there's actually real spiders in them. Her friend then proceeds to tell her that he found a receipt for fake spiders on the floor and that the spiders couldn't possibly have been real. Man, buddy, did you just happen to find the receipt for all those hacksaws, knives, maybe, you know, licenses to kill in there while you were at it? Weird. Just weird, I guess. Our unsafe crew now has to call through this really creepy maze that looks like a Splinter nightmare. Harper and the other guy make it through, but their flapper friend seems to have disappeared. That's no good. Now we're back to the safe gang, and they're having fun, just sticking their hands into mystery holes. Word to the wise, don't ever do that, kids. Trust me, at some point, losing your whole arm is the best case scenario to sticking your hand into weird holes. Bailey loses her ring in the hole and asks our hot protagonist to help her. He pretends to get attacked and starts laughing, only to find out that something is actually attacking her, and she calls out for help. They get her free and then find out she's actually been sliced extremely deep with a blade several times. Very weird. Our unsafe gang is feeling very uneasy that their flapper friend is now MIA, but the staff in the creepy masks tell them they have to continue on, so of course they do. They slide down a creepy murder slide and catch up to their chopped up friends. Their chopped up friends now tell them that Bailey is actually really hurt and they need to leave. But of course, they're all locked in there, and part of this is obviously now a murder game, and I don't know if they've noticed that yet. The witch is back, and she's showing them a new body bag. God, I wonder who's going to be in it. And to no one's surprise, it's the missing flapper girl from the maze. If it wasn't already obvious by now that since someone's arm's getting cut open, clearly their friend on the ground should make it very obvious that this is not a normal haunted house and that things are actually happening to them. Anyway, the witch very obviously murders their friend, and she doesn't even pretend that she was just hurt her. Like, she just literally stabs her. This clearly upsets all of them. A sexy male protagonist decides he needs to go and help his bleeding friend. He finds the most alarming mannequin room known to man and gets one of the employees to help him. He tells Bailey this wasn't supposed to happen and that he's going to get them out of there. He tells them that they're so close to the end they might as well continue on, but they are consistent that they want to go back the way they came, and he agrees to come with them. He reveals to them that if they go through the splinter-ridden maze thing with too many people, someone will fall through the floor. Yeah, if you didn't already know this place was evil and trying to kill you, that kind of would have been it for me. But they agree to go through one at a time. The idiots. But another method that the killers use to split up the group. Pretty smart decision, in my opinion, at least for the killers and the directors. And surprise, surprise, the masked creep decides to nail the exit shut, leaving him alone with one of the guys. Sexy male protagonist is in the maze and doesn't know it's nailed shut quite yet. Meanwhile, Harper and the other female character get attacked by another masked employee. The other female character is not so lucky and gets murdered. Meanwhile, Harper runs like the wind to attempt to escape. We cut back to our guy who is stuck outside with the masked killer and is unaware that the maze is nailed shut. He realizes that the phones are missing. You know, the phones you left with the crazy masked person at the front? Yeah, are you surprised that they're missing? Anyway, the masked guy from the beginning is looking through everybody's phones. He's most likely trying to find some kind of personal information about the people that he's murdering. This is when Harper's abusive boyfriend calls, and the man answers to tell him that he's too late. And this is when we actually get a glimpse of his terrifying face. This is actually something I really enjoyed about the movie. It's very drilled home in most slasher films that there's just a man under the mask, that they're just human. But in this movie, I think they really change it. They make them more clearly disturbing and almost not human in nature, even though they are biologically human. The guy outside that I had completely already forgotten about is about to have a face-off with our fake helper. Face-off, get it? Because they kind of have gross faces. I amuse myself. He asked the kid if we would like to see his face, and then we cut to the kid dead on the floor, so I guess the answer was no. I would have preferred a really epic unmasking scene, or at least some kind of mild struggle fight scene, but, you know, we're just gonna go with the fact that this kid that probably outweighed the killer by 100 pounds just died. You know, well, whatever. I'm not gonna show the next scene, but the killer literally rips the kid's face clean off with the hammer. It was pretty freaking awesome. We cut back to our hot male protagonist as he is faced with a new protagonist challenge. He finds the room where they keep all the phones, the killer break room, if you would. He loudly climbs under the tarp, because I guess no one hears him be that loud, and, you know, he will live to be a male protagonist another day, I suppose. We cut back to Harper. She appears to be finishing the maze, or at least near to it. It is full of booby traps and areas to die, obviously. And we switch back to the strong guy as he attempts to loudly leave the tarp, only to be faced with Hammer Guy. I'm calling them all different names now. It's switching back and forth a lot. It's a lot to narrate, okay? They tussle for a bit, but strong protagonist man runs off. Then he looks out the hatch in the ceiling and sees the exit and doesn't think to run to it. He's just that heroic, folks. Needs to save everyone. Harper sees this knife trap, and instead of running towards it and out, she just decides to look over at the guy cutting the rope to it. She finally comes to her senses and jumps through the exit, which is good, I suppose. There's this room labeled the escape room, which is kind of funny, especially if they just kind of kill people here. Is it normal that people are actually this intuitive and end up making it this far? And they have this room labeled the escape room that is apparently ironically whatever. As she enters the room, there's messages written backwards on the wall. And sorry, maybe I'm just being a little bougie, but like, how does she need a mirror to read this and can't just read it backwards? Is it normal to not be able to read backwards? Maybe I'm just being insensitive. Anyway, she finds all the clues, which leads her to be under the bed, which is apparently very conveniently a PTSD moment that reminds her of her abusive past and upbringing. Anyway, the masked guy in the room, he comes in the room with her, and as we saw earlier, the bed is like 3 feet above the ground, so he would obviously be able to see her, but for dramatic effect, we're gonna assume he doesn't see her for like 30 seconds. Eventually he does, and her and the killer tussle. She manages to knock him to the ground and start opening the door. She doesn't, at this moment, decide to finish him off or even pay attention to him. She just decides to stare at the opening door, which I must say is a little sus. Unshockingly, the door doesn't just open, and it's actually, a trap, and it's linked to a shotgun on the other side of the door, which goes off, and apparently she was miraculously only clipped by a small portion of the shell. The guy that she didn't decide to finish off decides to come after her, which is completely stupid on his end, considering, do these killers not talk to each other? There's literally a shotgun at the end of the wall. Like, is he not aware of that? But, unsurprisingly, he gets shot by the shotgun. They decide to send in a new masked character to defeat Harper, one we haven't seen before. Harper's ready to stab them, but when she actually stabs them, she realizes it was her friend Bailey, who we'd completely forgotten about and had probably just assumed she was dead up until this point, but, whatever. Just in time, male protagonist comes to save her, and they start busting out of the place together. They run into a masked character who immediately surrenders to them, and he states that he's there against his will, stating that they told him that if he attempted to leave or didn't do as they say, that they would literally take his face. Which I actually thought was a pretty unique cult-like concept to the villains in the movie. I kind of wish they had introduced it sooner, not really in like the last 10 minutes of the movie, but I thought it was kind of cool. Anyway, long story short, they get out and they're escaping. The male protagonist decides that as they are literally climbing over the fence, that he hasn't been a big enough hero, apparently. He decides to walk up to one of the murderers, who has a gun, mind you, with a freaking bat. Bringing a bat to a gunfight, I see. But I guess it pans out, and the murderer literally has stormtrooper-like aim and doesn't kill him. He proceeds to beat the death out of the guy. Beat the life out of the guy. You know what? It's a late night here. They get away in Harper's abusive boyfriend's truck that was left there. Oh yeah, so I forgot to mention there's like literally this like 2-second scene of Harper's abusive boyfriend coming into the factory and immediately getting murdered. It was so insignificant. Anyway, male protagonist is in the hospital because he's surviving, I guess. And she has a realization in the hospital that she's given the murderers her address and her mother's address, and she has to do something about it. Because the police probably, couldn't do anything about that. They probably, they didn't question her at all. Because, you know, I feel like at least 20 people got murdered that night, because we did see the group go in before them, and we have to assume there was another group before that group. Like, we have to assume these people killed at least 20 people that night, and, you know, the cops are just not on the case. The cops are just not investigating 20 people that have gone missing and are now dead. You know, there's only 2 survivors apparently. So, I mean, you know, that's, you know, these cops kind of suck. And not gonna lie, these killers kind of suck. Because, I mean, you know, I don't really think it'd be a great idea if you were a killer to kill 20 people in one night unless you plan to get caught. But anyway, we pan to our killer, and he's driving to her mother's address apparently, and he just casually walks into the house. You know, he doesn't, you know, attempt to break and enter. He just opens the door. He just walks right in apparently. And he walks right onto a sticky trap. And then he attempts to get off the sticky trap and then lands on a nail trap. And then Harper is just standing there with a gun and shoots him. Oh my god. Yes, as much as this murderer was breaking and entering and clearly a murderer, Harper is really going to have to explain her Home Alone traps to the policemen when they show up, as she explains that she shot someone. Oh my gosh. Anyway, overall, I went into this movie not really expecting anything. I expected it to be a horrible, just B movie as usual when I go on Shudder, but I was actually extremely pleased with how cool the movie was. It was a great slasher. There was a lot of gore, so I might not show all that, but definitely be ready for that if you want to check it out. I like that it didn't just have one villain. They clearly were a group, and they were all like aware of what was going on, except for the guy who didn't know there was a shotgun at the end of that hallway. We'll ignore that. But it seemed almost like a cult-like murderistic group that maybe travels, you know, with their traveling, you know, murder house thing they have going on, apparently, because they've probably done this before since they seemed so efficient at it. You know, I thought that the way it was orchestrated was very well. We had a very, you know, clearly obvious ending from our main character that she was going to survive, yada yada, you know, very neat. Anyway, I would really recommend it to anybody who likes slasher films or gore. It was great. It was just a film available on Shudder, so definitely go check it out. All right, guys, we've reached the end of the video, which means that this is the time that I am going to ask you and plead to you to subscribe to me. If you've gotten this far, clearly you liked my video, you might as well subscribe. I really appreciate it. It really helps me out. Please let me know if there's anything else that you would like me to review, and I will gladly do so. All right, guys, thanks. Have a good night.